Welcome to the Liberal Conservative Report. Today is a very special podcast, the first of many special podcasts to come, because I have a big announcement, and that is I've decided to change the format of the show a little bit. I've invited my friend Jeremy Sammons to co-host, and he's here today for the first time. So welcome, Jeremy.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I feel right at home.
My pleasure, man. Glad you decided to do this. And the studio looks great, by the way. And yeah, so basically we're going to meet once a week. We're going to decide on a time and a day. Right now it's Saturday, but eventually we're going to start doing these live, hopefully. And we'll have a specific day and time every week where we're going to meet, and we're just going to talk about news, what happened over the course of the week, what were the most important political and non-political events, and how they shape the current state of politics and life here in the United States and abroad. And we're going to have some fun with it too. Eventually, we'll also have guests on. We don't have anyone lined up yet, but this is going to be a fun project, a new chapter in the Liberal Conservative Report. But we will probably be changing that name as well. So if you're listening and you enjoy and you have some good name recognition, name ideas for us, just let us know. I guess, Jeremy, why don't you introduce yourself a bit?
My name is Jeremy Sammons. I'm 33, living just south of St. Louis, Missouri. That's me in a nutshell. So,
Nice.
I guess the way Zach and I, we know each other is we were both speakers on the Yang Gang Roundtable podcast. We connected through Yang Gang. We're both huge Yang supporters.
Yang Gang.
Ideologically, I consider myself a left-leaning libertarian. I guess if I was going to describe it a little bit further, I believe people should have as many freedoms available to them as possible. At the same time, I do think that the federal government plays a very important role in people's lives. Things like regulation are important. Things like even minimum wage to an extent are also very important. So I think I want people to be as free as possible, but at the same time, I don't want to toss the baby out with the bathwater. I'm not a burn it all down type of guy.
Mm-hmm.
But that's kind of where I'm coming from and how I view the world and how I digest things.
Yeah, I definitely consider myself a bit of a libertarian too. Probably more of a right libertarian, but I don't know. I've had some conversations with a few left libertarians, and I don't really know where we differ exactly, So, I mean, I'm sure as we're doing this project together, eventually we're going to come across a few things that we disagree on, which I'm actually looking forward to. It would be interesting to see why we disagree on certain topics, and but we both call ourselves libertarians, and both Yang libertarians, really. So you're supposedly on the left, and I'm supposedly on the right. This is going to be an interesting project.
I think I would say if you're the conservative liberal, then if you're the liberal conservative, I'm the conservative liberal.
So part of the reason why I think we should change the name of the podcast is I think the meaning of liberal is beginning to change a lot, and it's becoming synonymous with conservative. I mean, at that point, it's just it kind of loses its importance in the title. Like, I was really trying to attract people from the left and the right, Like I kind of considered myself a conservative, but I was a big Andrew Yang supporter who was running as a Democrat, so I kind of saw some uh, left in me, or centrality, I guess you could say. But I'm beginning to think a lot of people on the left today are starting to view liberals as conservatives. And I think even a lot of conservatives are even starting to embrace some positions that have previously been liberal positions, like gay marriage, for example. I think a lot of conservatives today support gay marriage, whereas 10, 15 years ago, that wasn't so much the case. So, that there's that saying that the liberals of today are the conservatives of tomorrow. I think we're kind of seeing that merge a bit, you know?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think this. I think the Trump phenomenon has definitely accelerated that too.
Yeah.
With the Never Trumpers and the Lincoln Project, and I mean all the Republicans speaking at the DNC. Um, yeah, I think you're correct in that assessment,
Yeah.
and I think that there is this from both wings of the party. I, I'm not sure if you could say it's coming to the center, but they are centering around perhaps just neoliberalism, in general,
Hmm.
and then that's becoming the party.
What is neoliberalism? I hear this term all the time, and it's I kind of understand it, but it's always something that really kind of like confused me a bit, and I think probably confuses a lot of people out there. And I don't mean to put you on the spot, but do you have like a good definition for neoliberalism?
I think the best definition would be is whenever you put people or leaders such as um, into high positions, whether it be the House, the Senate, or even the White House, um, that they have the interests are only for the oligarchs that run this country, or for big
Yeah.
businesses, or for the machines that are just behind the surface. The military industrial complex.
Mhm.
They're not in the for the, they're not there to help the common man. They're not entirely there to help the people as a whole. They have these these people that they have to answer to, and as long as they keep them happy and do their bidding, they can remain in power. And I think that's probably the best way to describe the political system that we've kind of painted ourselves into the corner of.
Hmm. So in a way, it's basically a philosophy of governing that creates the swamp that everybody hates, right?
Yeah.
Because you have like all these politicians who just want to serve their donors and the elites essentially, and this is not something that's confined to one party or the other. It's really both parties. It's the people on Wall Street who are supporting um, certain Democrats and certain Republicans, but then there's people in both parties who are kind of trying to tear down that neoliberal framework at the same time, right? Like I guess like Bernie Sanders is not a neoliberal, and in a way, Trump, I don't know, probably isn't a neoliberal either. Would
No,
he right? He wouldn't be considered one.
no, I not definitely not in my opinion.
Yeah.
Trump, just like Bernie Sanders, totally against against NAFTA, the
Right.
TPP. Um, I think if push came to shove, Bernie would not support the Iran nuclear deal either.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of parallels that I guess I'm not sure if it's come like have we come up with a name for this Trumperism that exists within the right? Like is I guess you could call it populism to an extent, but it, it's yeah, I'm not sure how you define it.
Yeah, I know Trumpism. I guess. I mean, that's the best term I could think of. I mean, it's definitely populist for sure. But I mean, so is the Sanders movement. That's very populist in a way too. The Yang
Mhm.
movement was a central populist. It was positive populism. Most populist movements, I think, usually there's a like strong negative undertones. Um, you know, the Yang movement was very positive and optimistic in a way, even though he was saying that, the automation and machines are taking over. It was more like there's something we can leverage that and turn it into something great for humanity. He really turned an ugly picture into a beautiful painting in a way. But it was still like an argument from outside of the existing um, um, uh, philosophical framework that I guess is neoliberalism, right? Um, yeah, I kind of went on a little rant there, but what that similarity between the right, the populists on the right, and the Bernie people on the left, kind of reminds me of something that you said in response to that QAnon link that I sent to you, and I thought you said something very wise there that I hadn't heard before, and I'm referring to the that crazy conspiracy theory that circulated, I guess, on 4chan or 8chan. I don't even know what exactly the website's called. I think they're both two different websites, right? That do exist, 4chan and 8chan.
Yes, they're
I read
separate.
about that. Yeah. But anyway, if you're unfamiliar with QAnon, there this conspiracy theory that basically says that the government is controlled by pedophiles, and they Donald Trump is basically the savior who went to Washington to break down these pedophile rings and stuff. And I think this conspiracy theory, I kind of think it began as a joke, but then um, after what's his name, Jeffrey Epstein was arrested, and we got to see like, wow, Bill Clinton's been on his plane to that island, all these other famous people too. Maybe there is something to this, maybe there is some kind of like high level pedophile rings. But what I was trying to ask was, what is the connection that you made that I thought was so genius between the QAnon people and the far left as it relates to our government and corruption?
Right. So I think the way I see it is, yeah, on the right. Well, I guess it's first to establish that both we're comparing the QAnon people to the radical. Um, I would refer to them the radical woke left that is gaining traction. And the thing they have in common is that they each have like this boogeyman that lurks just beneath the surface. So on the right, you have these the QAnon people that think that there's some kind of deep state pedophile ring that controls the planet, and then on the left version, you have their version of the boogeyman is you have these racists that control every institution, that suppress every minority, and then while these racist oligarchs are still in power, that no one else can ever rise, or very few people can rise to have a decent standard of living. And I think what they both have in common at their core, though, and if they both realize it, is that they both have a common enemy, and that
Mhm.
common enemy is corruption, right? So, the left, both the left and the right, their boogeymen couldn't exist unless there was some kind of deep seated corruption allowing it. And I think if they've really like walked back, each of their conspiracy theories, they would actually figure out what's going on and actually find some commonality. And
Yeah.
if they came together, that'd be a big deal.
Yeah, so really, it's both of these ideas have been spawned by corruption and in the outrage that people, average people, feel when they hear about the whole like Harvard and Ivy League admission scandal, like for example, these elites are able to send their kids to these, you know, excellent schools, even though their kids don't perform very well in school. If you're rich and you're well connected, you're going to have a leg up compared to everybody else. And people are pissed, and they're trying to
Yeah.
find an enemy, I guess. And instead of just saying it's corruption, somehow it becomes racists that are in charge, and pedophiles, which is the whole pedophile thing is very strange. But I mean, even like it within the Catholic Church, they've had these scandals going back, centuries probably, where you have these rings within the Catholic Church of priests touching kids, and then they get caught, and the church just moves the priest to a different area, and the whole thing gets swept under the rug. I mean, these rings, as crazy as it sounds, they do exist,
Hmm.
and every once in a while, I guess, the public gets a glimpse of something disgusting going on, or we're on the left, like an audio tape will leak of somebody saying something racist or something, and they go, aha, you see, they're all racists in charge. And I don't know, I just thought that was a very eye-opening connection that you made between the left and the right regarding QAnon.
Yeah, I think it's just yeah, I think it's just important to also, I guess, to remember that, or to at least keep in mind that there are some legitimate reasons of why people even entertain these ideas.
Yeah.
Um, just like as you said, I mean, I mean, human trafficking is definitely a real thing.
Hmm.
I mean, institutional racism, it definitely is a thing. It's just whether or not to the extent that both parties claim them to be. Um, that's where it gets messy, you know.
Right. I mean, it's neither of these things are probably really in control of everything. You know what I mean? I mean, not everything is rooted in racism or pedophilia. But
Right.
that's what these groups would want you to believe, one or the other, and it's not true. I mean, we have problems. There are elements of systemic racism tied into our policies and our system, and we have to try to untie that a bit. Um, but it's not the definition, I guess. It's not inherent in who we are as a people, and the American government, I do not think, is a racist institution. It's just we have outcomes that aren't don't appear to be even. And there are things that we could do to try to provide more opportunities for people, but you know um, trying to say that everything is racist, I just think is just a bridge too far. And yeah.
Yeah. But I guess, yeah, while we're on the topic of QAnon, I guess you want to move over into this guy that was fired from Citigroup.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, as crazy as the QAnon thing is, and I mean, I know we just kind of gave a little bit of legitimacy, I guess you could say, to the conspiracy theory, because, like I said, the Catholic Church has been caught in these scandals. There was the Jeffrey Epstein situation. The whole idea that Donald Trump is in Washington to fight pedophiles, I think, is just bizarre. And I mean, it's a very intricate conspiracy theory that I don't know really any of the details about, besides that surface. But anyway, there was this guy who worked for Citibank, and he was somewhat high profile person there, I think. and turns out he was operating a QAnon website, and somehow his name was leaked, and Citigroup found out that he worked. I mean, he was running this website, and they put him on a leave of absence. Um, what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's pretty messed up. I think for as wild and crazy as the QAnon folks are, um, is it a also? I mean, we also don't know the whole details of this whole situation. All right, so it looks to be like this guy's identity was leaked. They reached out to his employer and they said, "Hey, look what your guy's doing over here," and then they fired him. Which I don't know. Like it's and he had worked there for a long time too. I mean, I want to say he had worked there for like more than 15 years. So like they knew the guy, they had a working relationship with him.
Yeah.
Um, um, so it seems, without knowing more, I would say on the surface it seems despicable.
Yeah, I just think it's a shame that, you know, mobs are able to influence hiring and firing decisions of companies now. You know, it's like, you know, the mob says they don't like this person's politics, then they need to, they got to lose their job, and you know, these companies are just caving. You know, this is the United States of America, and we believe in freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of thought. You know, these things are very important, and you're allowed to have thoughts that are wrong. You know what I mean? I mean, there is no crime in believing a conspiracy theory, and it turns out that some of these conspiracy theories are correct. I mean, the Gulf of Tonkin, for example, like how we got involved in Vietnam, that was a conspiracy theory. Turned out that it was true. Um, the uh, the sinking of the Maine, you know, how we got involved in the Spanish American War. You know, this I think the boiler on this ship basically went up in flames and ended up sinking in over by Cuba. But we were basically saying that the Spanish bombed the ship, and that wasn't true. It was really just, you know, an untruth that the government put out there. Um, you know, so I'm getting at is you shouldn't lose your job just because you think something that's contrary to what most people believe. You know, it's like being fired for saying that the moon landings were false. I mean, that may be an outrageous claim to make, but I mean, so what? You know what I mean? So what if the guy working in the cubicle next to you thinks that we never landed to the moon? How does that impact the bottom line of the company? How does that affect company performance? It has nothing to do with that, and I just think that people shouldn't be penalized for their beliefs.
No, absolutely not. I think perhaps if this guy was involved with, I mean, he ran a website that that harvested what they call Q drops from 8chan. Perhaps if I'm completely just speculating here, but if he was involved with other 8chan type behavior, that kind of stuff would be probably grounds for a removal of your job. However, that doesn't seem to be the case here.
How so? So what's a Q drop? Start there.
All right, so as I know it, a Q drop is when whoever this Q individual is, he makes a post on 8chan, and they're generally just like strange rambling, like none of them are like coherent or straightforward. Like you have to like read between lines, and it's some weird, crazy parable. Um, they're very strange. They're very
Yeah.
strange, and
So
how they've grown to such popularity is very
yeah.
fascinating.
So this is basically just somebody who goes by the name Q. They'll basically post a message on 8chan, and it will be a long, confusing um, story or a post or a claim or something, and you kind of have to read between the lines to try to figure out what the hell they're talking about, and like people begin to draw their own conclusions, I guess, right? And it's meanwhile, this is probably somebody who is like just laughing their ass off every time they're making this stuff up. And dude, people are like showing up at Trump rallies with like signs that say "Who is Q?" and like these people are becoming mainstream kind of.
Right.
It's a
Well,
crazy phenomenon.
yeah, the website this guy was running got like 10 million visits a month.
Whew,
So I
that
mean,
is crazy.
it's
I wonder if most of these people visiting the website are really buying into the theory, or if they're just like going there for laughs.
I mean, there definitely are some true believers out there. I think,
Yeah,
and I'm sure there's some people just that have a morbid curiosity with the whole situation too, because it is fascinating.
it is.
Like it's just like you hear about there's like this weird group on the internet that is focused on exposing all these pedophiles within the deep state. It's like what? And then you
Yeah,
hear like, wait, is it? There's millions of people that buy into this. You're like what? It's like I gotta see this shit for
yeah,
myself.
yeah. Has anybody actually been exposed by QAnon as a pedophile?
I don't think so. I'm
But yet,
I,
yet it's
I, I'm like
still
I'm like 99.9%
yeah,
sure that no, nothing has come from it.
fascinating, fascinating. But yeah, as crazy as it is, man, you shouldn't lose your job over something like that. I don't think, you know what I mean. If you're like making threats on your website and trying to incite people to like attack people and stuff, that's one thing. That's grounds for termination for sure, and impossible law enforcement involvement. But I mean, just having a crazy belief in itself should not affect your employment status. I mean, what if employers start firing people for being Christians, for example? I mean, some would say that's crazy. You believe in a spaghetti monster up in the sky who created everything? That's crazy, man. I mean, I, I mean, how far fetched is that? You know, I don't think it's that far fetched.
No, I mean, well, obviously this person was terminated because he committed a thought crime, and yeah, it's in this situation, uh, this guy had no course of action, and I know he was married, has kids, um, and yeah, it's just a terrible situation to put anybody in.
Yeah,
You
and
know,
it's
I mean,
nuts.
like, you'd also say, like, what about Scientologists or like, I mean, I guess what you could really say this guy was fired for being a hardcore Trump supporter, right?
Yeah,
I mean, like the hardest of the hard. I mean, like the furthest of the far right. Besides, well, the real far right. You know what I mean? Yeah.
yeah.
But
Um,
yeah, poor guy. My
we
heart goes out to him.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Definitely. I don't know him, but I don't think he should have lost his job. Um, what do you think about the this Michael Caputo guy and the bizarre conspiracy theories that he is pushing supposedly? And I mean that in quotations. Bizarre conspiracy theories.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. So Caputo's a really interesting guy. He was, make sure I get it right. He was appointed as the Assistant Secretary of Public Affairs for the Department of Health and Human Services.
mhm.
He was appointed back in April, which was kind of in the heat of the pandemic outbreak. I mean, everything was getting shut down.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, trust in government was at at an all time low. I mean, it's still bad now, but back
Oh
in
yeah.
April, I think everybody was just terrified. So this guy was basically installed into the HHS to create some positive spin on the administration's efforts to curb the coronavirus pandemic. So I think it's important to know his history because it kind of puts this situation into perspective. And yeah, I think everything that we're going to talk about today, they're kind of all connected in certain ways.
Yeah, they are.
So he gets his job at the CDC. I'm sorry, the HHS, and he just repeatedly butts heads with the folks over at the CDC. So the accusation from his end was, this information that you guys are putting out, you're politicizing it. You're not giving the full story of how much, all the good that we're doing on the, that the Trump administration is doing. So what it comes down to is they start altering or reviewing press releases before the CDC publishes it, which is, I'm not sure if that's the right thing to do, but that's what happened. So he was in a constant battle between himself and the CDC, and I think when you do that kind of thing, you're gonna have a lot of backlash. I think well, you go to war with any administration or any organization, you're gonna have backlash, and months of that backlash it's gonna wear you down.
Mm-hmm.
And so, also one thing I want to bring up too is in the very beginning of the pandemic, one of the HHS memos was leaked. And if you guys haven't checked it out, I would encourage you to track it down. It's still out there online. But it's a lot of the things that it talked about. Really, it came into fruition. I think this was back in February or March when it hit the internet. But it talked about how the pandemic is expected to last 18 months. There was going to be breakdowns in the supply chain. There was going to be civil unrest, and it listed the plans that the government was going to try to implement in these situations as they arose. It's a very interesting read. So anyway, Caputo, he goes on Facebook Live, and so as you do when you go on Facebook Live, you have people that can comment. You can have a conversation with people.
Yeah.
And during this conversation with his followers, he begins to talk about some stuff that's been going on inside the HHS, and I think his the direction he thinks things are going within the organizations, and he said some pretty some big things.
Yeah. Basically saying that there's a resistance unit inside the CDC that's trying to undermine Trump, right? I mean, but at the same time, can't you say that Trump and his guy at HHS are trying to undermine the CDC, right? It's kind of like they're both just pointing their fingers in both directions in a way.
Right. I think I think what it comes down to is a failure to find common ground and a failure to cooperate between the two agencies.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's also very true that there is a large anti-Trump sentiment held amongst many prominent officials, and if I would not surprise me whatsoever that if there were people inside the CDC that were trying to portray the coronavirus message in such a way that it would be damaging to Trump. I think there were some emails that were leaked from Caputo that showed how he was trying to curb the stuff. So like people from the CDC would go on to onto like CNN or speak with just reporters in general, and they would give like this bleak outlook about the future and the current situation. And they felt like they weren't portraying the situation accurately.
Mm-hmm. So, in other words, the worse they made it sound, the worse it would make Trump sound. Basically.
Exactly
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But yeah, in this Facebook Live thing, he talks about how there's these left-wing organizations that are planning for violence after the election.
I believe that.
I believe it too.
Yeah.
I think he also talks about just he says you understand they're going to have to kill me, and unfortunately I think that's where this is going. That's one of the more prominent things he said during this Facebook Live thing. But I think also the way the media the way the media portrayed this Facebook Live thing is you would have thought that like Alex Jones himself was on Facebook Live making crazy conspiracy theories. In the video, I was like, all right, so like as soon as I heard about this, like, holy shit, I gotta track this thing down and see it. Like,
Yeah.
sounds nuts. I mean, it might take a little bit of effort, but you can find it in parts. I have not seen the whole thing. I've had to, from 2 different websites, found a part, and now he's calm, he's collected. He's not he's not freaking out. He's not alarmist in any way. He's I think in his Facebook Live video, he was completely honest. I did not sense an ounce of dishonesty from within that man.
He seemed depressed to me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Who wouldn't be? I mean, like, regardless of like, I don't give a fuck who you are. Yeah, if you're in that job, it's gonna be hard, especially during a pandemic. Oh man, tough job. So
And didn't like during the video, as he's saying that, like he thinks people are gonna come for him, a car drove by and they like yelled out the window or something at him, right?
yeah, he's sitting on his front porch. And yeah, he gets heckled by this guy in a truck, which I think he says something to the effect of like, "You should be ashamed of yourself, you pig." And but yeah, I mean, Jesus, like it's
Yeah.
like
Imagine that.
they know where he lives. Like,
Yeah.
like, I mean, imagine just going out on your front porch and being harassed like that.
Yeah. Screwed up.
Not healthy.
Crazy, crazy world.
Um,
Um,
yeah, but yeah, since then, he's resigned, and then to put some icing on the cake, so he resigned like 2 days ago, and then yesterday, the CDC, I guess what's the word for it? They updated their testing recommendations. So originally on the CDC website, it said that if you had come into contact with a person who was known to be positive with COVID, that you should go get a test. Well, that's what it says right now. But if you would have gone on there 2 days ago, it would have said, if you come into contact with someone who's COVID positive, you don't need to get a test unless you are showing symptoms. And they are claiming that it was the HHS that forced them to list on the CDC website that yeah, you should not get a test unless you have symptoms.
that's just crazy. I mean, the only reason I could see why they'd want to do that is if we don't have enough tests for everybody to use who has been in contact with people with the coronavirus, which probably is true as well. It's like when they were saying early on that masks don't really do anything,
Oh my God!
right?
Yeah, that was Orwellian. So I
Yeah,
mean, it's I mean, the trust is to put your complete faith in the CDC, to put your complete faith in the HHS. Um, I think you would be unwise
yeah.
to do so.
People
Um,
need to think for themselves.
right.
We
Well,
can't just rely on the government to do the thinking for us. It's obvious in my mind that masks are going to help. It prevents you from breathing directly on another person and vice versa. And obviously, testing is going to be good. I mean, it's not going to cure the disease, but if you at least know that you have it and you're contagious, then stay home. I
yeah.
mean,
But I mean, they the government, the agency has lied to us in the beginning of it, and they. I mean, as it seems to be now, the HHS was lying to us, and I'm sure there will be more lies to be revealed in the future.
and do you know what that's called when a group of people within the government get together and decide to lie to the American people?
What's that?
It's called a conspiracy.
Oh,
So,
that's
like
what
I
that
said,
is.
sometimes conspiracy theories end up being true.
Yeah,
So you can't just ban people from believing in conspiracy theories or fire people from their jobs. I mean, just to go full circle with that. Oh man.
yeah, yeah. It really pisses me off with that guy getting fired. It really upsets me.
Yeah. Oh, me too. Me too. All right. So you kind of mentioned left-wing activists possibly planning violence after the election. What do you think is going to happen?
It's going to be chaos.
Yeah, yeah,
um, all right. So I think there's a lot of ways this election season could go.
yes. And it
Um,
just got a hell of a lot crazier with the passing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, which, by the way, I don't know how we didn't mention at the top of this. I think I was planning to, and then we just went in a different direction. But
oh yeah, you're right.
I do want
My
to
bad.
briefly say that that was my fault. I do want to briefly say that my condolences go out to the Ginsburg family. Um, Definitely a shame that she has passed. But yeah, things are going to be nuts up until the and past the election, really.
Mhm. Yeah, I think well, Ginsburg or the Supreme Court plays a role in this too.
Mhm.
Um, and it's yeah, let's hang out here for a while and talk about like
Yeah,
why the Supreme Court matters right now. And
yeah.
I guess if you want to take the mic for a minute here.
Um, I mean, if there's a very good chance that this election is going to be contested, regardless of who wins. If well, first of all, there's a very good chance that we're not going to actually know who the winner is on election night because we're going to have a record amount of mail-in ballots that need to be opened up and read and put into the Biden pot, put into the Trump pot. You know what I mean? That all needs to be sorted out, and there's just no way that's going to be done on election day because I mean, even though you can cast in your ballots now, which if you plan on mailing in your ballot, I highly encourage you to do it early. It will help alleviate the stress that the system is going to face on election day. But regardless, most people, it's human nature to wait till the last minute to do something. Most people are going to wait until the last minute to vote. And many of those votes are going to come in through the mail because of COVID. Um, Trump has been casting doubts on the Postal Service, basically, and on this whole mail in ballot thing. He's been saying that the only way he loses is if the Democrats, if there's massive fraud relating to mail in ballots in the Postal Service. Um, so if Trump loses, there's a very good chance he's going to turn around and say that it was fraud. He really won. There were millions and millions of fraudulent ballots that were sent in through the mail. And you know what? There is a possibility that there is going to be fraud. I mean, there's a very good chance that there are people on the left who are going to try to vote twice, you know, once in person and once through the mail. I definitely think that's a very real possibility. So there is a grain of salt here in what Trump possibly would say if he loses. Um, at the same time, there's a very good chance that Trump could win. I think this is going to be a very close election. If Trump wins, there's a very good chance that people on the left say Trump only won because of voter suppression, and he was suppressing the vote through the mail, or you know, there's this argument over going on right now between which ballots should be counted. Should it only be ballots that arrive at the post office before election day, or should it be the ballots that are stamped on or before election day? You know, what is the cutoff? So election day is coming. It's basically a cliff, and we're on a train speeding towards that cliff. You know, we can't move that deadline, and we still have these outstanding questions that need to be answered, and the results are going to come in, and then there's going to be a fight over, you know, how do we decide who the president is? How do we decide who really won? And that would be where the Supreme Court would step in. And now there's a vacancy. So yeah, it's a big deal.
Yeah, massive. I mean, I mean, do you remember the fiasco uh, with Bush Gore back in
Yes.
2000?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
And that all
and so
came down to one county in Florida
uh,
that had these hanging chads, basically, is what they called it, right? Where they were using these voting booths that basically made hole punches. And sometimes what would happen was think I might be a little bit wrong on this, but I think the ballots like in the machines would be stacked on top of each other, and when the hole puncher came down, sometimes it would make a little impression on the ballot beneath it or something, and so you'd have these some sheets of paper that had like multiple indentions into it, and they weren't really sure which one that person was really voting for. And there were other ballots that had like the hole punch was like 80% punched, but it was hanging a little bit, and that's what they called the hanging chad. Do you count that or not? Was that a mistake? So that went to the Supreme Court, and they basically ruled in favor of Bush. So I mean, this is very important, and now there's a chance that, I mean, even before this Ruth Bader Ginsburg passing situation, a lot of people on the left feel that the Republicans stole a seat because Mitch McConnell refused to hear a vote from Merrick Garland, who was the nominee that Obama nominated Merrick Garland to the Supreme Court, and then the Senate is supposed to vote and confirm or deny a nominee. But Mitch McConnell, who was in charge of the Senate still back then, he basically refused to hold a vote. And because of that, we have Neil Gorsuch instead of Merrick Garland sitting on the bench right now. So now we have a similar situation. We have an election that's 45 days away. We have a vacancy on the court. And back then, the logic used by Mitch McConnell was what? We're close to an election. There's a vacancy. We got to let the American people decide. We'll let the next president nominate someone to the bench, and then we'll confirm or deny that nominee. And now he's flipped 180 degrees. Within 30 minutes of RBG's passing, he's putting out a statement on Twitter saying that we will vote on Trump's nominee, whoever that person is.
Right. Well, I think you can use people's words against them from 2016 and both parties here too.
Mm-hmm.
So the Democrats were saying it's our constitutional authority that you are denying us. Well, now how the tables have turned.
Yeah.
I think why it's really important to have a functioning Supreme Court right now is it's this whole mail-in. All right, so like the changes because of the coronavirus, the change to the voting system has it's been a mess. So right now, there's like 250 lawsuits right now across the country about mail-in voting when it comes to ballot access. When it comes, in Wisconsin, they just kicked the Green Party off. There's a lot of legal battles out there, and Bush v. Gore came down to one nasty legal battle in Florida, and I think we're going to have a lot of Floridas. And it's going to be wild, man.
Yeah. So regardless, there's going to be a lot of people out there who are just not going to accept the outcome of the presidency, whatever that is. And there's going to be protests and rioting, I think. And I'm I hate to sound pessimistic, but I'm very nervous right now. I think we're heading somewhere that's very dark.
Yeah, I agree. I think in general, I think if you were going to poll every person in America and ask them, how do you feel about the future of this country? Yeah, I think a vast majority of people would feel at least concerned. And if you were to poll people and ask, hey, do you feel stressed out?
Yeah.
Pretty much everybody's gonna say, "Fuck yeah, I'm really stressed out, man." And so I think it's the catalyst for things to ignite here are are so perfect. And I think when you consider the issues with employment, racial justice, with the handling of the coronavirus, with the handling of the integrity of the election, I mean, you're going to have so many people just so many people angry about so many different things that I don't see the consensus being a pretty one.
Hmm.
And I think if you look at history and if you look at some of the writings that people have done, we are we are in the peak of what is known as a secular circle,
Hmm.
and that this ties into the work of Peter Turchin, who so he analyzed the history of the United States and saw he what he what he was looking at was protests against the government. He was looking at riots, and he also was measuring lynchings in their frequency.
Hmm.
And what he came to find when he plugged the data in is about every 50 years or so there's there's called a peak in the political stress index. And when things reach this level, things are pretty chaotic in the United States for about, if you're lucky, 5 years, and if you're not so lucky, 15 years. So, looking at the data of where we are now, it aligns with around where we were 50 years ago. This would be in the 60s, and 60s there was a lot of political turmoil with the Vietnam War. Also, you go, 50 years before that, it would be really in the 20s in that situation where you had issues with labor, where you had right on the heels or the right before the Great Depression. Um, Go back 50 years before that, but then you had the that was right after the Civil War, and Jesus Christ, what a turbulent time that was.
Yeah. Yeah, there's this one chart that he includes in that article. Very good article, by the way. I definitely think everyone should check it out. But there's this chart that basically shows us today the the political stress index basically shows today our stress levels matching those of the Civil War era. You know, I mean, that's scary shit. And he also like looks at other countries too, like the the income inequality levels today here in the United States are similar to how they were in France on the eve of the French Revolution, you know, and how they were in China before the Chinese Revolution and in Russia before the Russian Revolution. And, you know, we don't want to go down that route, you know. I mean, revolutions are extremely bloody and they often don't go very well. Um, but he also provides kind of a path out of it, which I like too. You know, we don't have to go down that route. And you know, he talks about how there were two examples of two different countries and two different eras that kind of managed these heightened political stress levels. And one was the UK in the 1830s. They decided to adopt a number of reforms, and they basically gave some more political say to the people. And in turn, they were able to elect better representatives to parliament, and they basically were able to um, you know, adopt some reforms that the people liked, and they were able to avoid revolutions. And this was an era where the revolutions were sweeping across Western Europe. Um, you know, this coincides with the early industrial revolution, basically. Um, the UK was, of course, the first real industrialized country. Um, it was kind of delayed here a little bit because we had the Civil War, you know. But I think the first railroads were built in like the 1830s maybe.
Sounds
in the
right.
UK, I think, right? So this is like the era where people were beginning to be crammed into factories and really, shitty working environments and whatnot. So there were a lot of grievances that people had. Um, and the other example was the United States in the 1930s, about 100 years later. We had the Great Depression here. People were miserable. Um, the political stress index was getting pretty out of whack, and then came FDR and the New Deal and policies that alleviated some of the concerns of the people, or at least had the appeal to do that. I mean, I know there's this whole argument that it was really World War II that took us out of the Great Depression, and FDR's policies only extended the depression. And I'm actually kind of sympathetic to some of those viewpoints, but the policies pushed by FDR at least put trust back into government, and that's something that we're lacking today. Nobody trusts our government. We need to elect leaders who we can trust, who are at least talking about things that at least will appear to be good for the working class. And if we don't do that, we're heading somewhere very dark. We're going to have a revolution here. It's going to happen.
I agree. Yeah. Yeah. I think when all right, one mistake that the United States made in the 1870s, excuse me, was that when the South said they were going to secede, people didn't take them seriously. And then
Yeah.
hey, guess what? Yeah, they seceded. We had a whole war about it. So when people are talking about violence or calls for violence,
Mm-hmm.
take it seriously.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, you look at Hitler. I mean, he was talking about his hatred of the Jews well before he was in power, but a lot of people didn't really take him that seriously.
Mhm.
They should have.
Yeah,
I mean, you got to take people at their word, especially when what they're threatening is something that with implications that would be that big, whether we're talking about succeeding or, succession or, starting a war or anything, or persecuting people. Got to take people at their word. Oh, I know where I was going with this. There's been talk following the passing of RBG, but before this as well, but it's kind of accelerated, I think, over the past few days of Puerto Rican statehood and statehood even for Washington D.C. And because Democrats feel that, I mean, so if Trump gets to nominate another conservative for the Supreme Court bench, um, I think that in an effort to kind of take back control, I mean, this wouldn't really affect the Supreme Court so much, but in an effort to at least take back the Senate, um, I think a lot of Democrats favor statehood for both Puerto Rico and DC because those areas would be blue areas, right? And that would be more senators for the Democrats, right? And if there's more Democratic senators, that means that when it comes to Supreme Court nominations, the Democrats would have more say.
right. And it's also more votes for the Electoral College. Not
Yeah.
they wouldn't be major players in the Electoral College, but having something's better than nothing. Take all the help you can get.
Yeah.
I think I think what it comes down to is like do these territories deserve statehood? I think the case for Washington D.C. is fairly simple. However, it's in the Constitution that's not a state.
Mm-hmm.
and there's
Right. The
some
Constitution actually says that DC is not a state, right?
right. Yeah, I mean, and they lay out some good reasons too. That it's separate. It's not a real player. It's an attempt to distance itself from the corruption that inherently breeds within the political system.
Hmm.
Um, but when it comes up to Puerto Rico too, I mean, I fail to see a good arguing case against granting Puerto Rico statehood at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like if we have Hawaii as a state, I'm
Right.
not sure what's preventing us from doing the same to Puerto Rico.
Right. No, Puerto Rico, I think definitely deserves it. I mean, if they want it, it's up to them, and I think it is right. I can't they just apply for statehood if that's what they choose to do?
I'm not sure what the process of one has to go through, but I would imagine if it is that simple, then they would have had it by now. Because I mean,
Well,
that's a territory that gets rocked by hurricanes all the time,
yeah.
and I think if they were an actual state versus a territory, there'd be so much more federal aid would be available, especially with the pandemic. Because they're not a state, they got the shaft for
Yeah.
the money that went to the states, and not so much for them. Um, so
Yeah. I mean, I think there are tax implications, though, right? Like, I think as a territory, they don't really have to pay federal taxes. I think, right?
yes, you are correct. Yeah, there are. I forgot who was I listening to, but they were talking. There's a guy who moved to Puerto Rico. He said it was awesome because,
Oh,
yeah,
I know,
you
I know, I know. It was Peter Schiff,
Peter Schiff. Okay,
right? Am I right?
I
I'm
think
just
so.
taking a random guess.
I think
The financial guy.
it was a Rogan interview. Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, he said it's great down there. Yeah, you don't have to pay taxes. I mean, you can't vote, but you know, that's 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 the devil. The deal with the devil you got to make, I guess, if that's what's more important to you.
Yeah. But yeah, no, Puerto Rico definitely deserves statehood if they want it, in my
Right.
opinion. And you know what's actually a concern about Puerto Rico for me is if we like what happened with that Hurricane Maria. You know, they're still not recovered. Um, what happens if instead of statehood, Puerto Rico decides to vote for independence because we ignored them essentially the last when they had this hurricane? What if they just feel like the United States isn't really protecting them or representing them very well, and they'd much rather be an independent country? And what if they decide to go that route, which on its face I don't think would be that big of a deal until you have foreign players starting to say, like China or Russia, starting to say, yeah, Puerto Rico, you should become independent. And you know what? We'll help you make that case. And, and Puerto Rico, what happens if Puerto Rico starts cozying up to like a Russia or a China because they feel that the United States is kind of giving them the finger? You
Uh,
need defense.
yeah,
I mean, Puerto
yeah.
Rico, we recognize your independence. Are you afraid that the United States is going to invade your island and try to take it back? We'll give you some defensive weapons and technology. And next thing you know, you got the Cuban Missile Crisis all over, except it's centered around Puerto Rico.
I think, man, Puerto Rico is just so westernized and Americanized at this point. You know, we got military bases there too, so I mean, there's a lot of strategic reasons of why we keep them around. Um, I I don't see the path and the things that would have to happen for that to be the outcome of where they completely detach from the United States and or like defect essentially
Yeah.
and side with the other. Um, we have we've definitely not been the the most hospitable to the Puerto Ricans. However, I don't think they would see that offer as something better than what they currently have. Um, I mean, what would China or Russia give Puerto Rico that we don't already?
Well, defense, like what happens? What happens if the Puerto Ricans have just had enough with the United States? I mean, especially with all the, the anti-immigrant rhetoric, or at least the, there's this notion that Trump is a racist, and you know what, he probably is, but I don't fully buy it, to be honest with you. I think he's just more of a dumbass, and I think he says things sometimes that sound more racist than they are, just because he doesn't know how to phrase things better. But there is this image building, I think, of the United States that we are an inherently racist country. And the United States, they don't like blacks, they don't like Hispanics. We don't like the Chinese because they gave us the China virus, and like all these things are starting to brew. And what happens? I could see like people in Puerto Rico starting to feel like they're not really Americans,
Mhm.
and just wanting independence because they're angry at us, frankly. And if they're able to join some kind of international, maybe they start thinking like similar to how people in the UK were thinking in the lead up to Brexit, that if they have their independence, they'll have more leverage to form uh, their own trade deals with other countries, and maybe less dependence on the United States, who they don't. The United States doesn't care about us anyway. Maybe they'll be able to make some better trade deals with other countries, and they might be better off. Who knows? I could see that thought process setting in.
Yeah, it is entirely possible. I think. Shit. Considering how the 2020 election goes down and how much
Yeah.
chaos erupts from it, shit, we might just be giving them away.
Yeah. You ever think any other states might just decide to leave the union? If we have chaos following this election, what do you think? It's bizarre to think that maybe like West Coast states, where they have most of these riots, they might say enough is enough, where we're breaking away or something. You think that's possible?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It could get so crazy that the outcome, literally is the destruction of the United
Yeah.
States. And I think it absolutely could be. Secession has always been a common narrative in
Yeah.
politics. So as long as I've been alive, whether it's Texas wanting to break off,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's California with the whole Cal exit movement,
Mm-hmm.
um, there is a political will that exists within people for
Yeah.
this to actually happen. And I think if I was a progressive, which I'm not, but if I was a progressive on the West Coast, man, I would be rallying for us to, like, let's form a Western pack. We got California,
Yeah.
we got Washington, we got Oregon. We'd still have the fucking like sixth or fifth largest economy in the world. It's like the Republican Party is not, they're not going to let us in with our progressive politics. They're only going to pay us lip service and nothing more. It's, we could remove ourselves from this, and we could have our own progressive government. And
Yeah, I could see it happening. I mean, uh, why not? It's happened before, right? It's happened in the 1860s, and the political stress index. It's looking like the 1860s right now.
yeah,
And all right, here's another scenario. Trump loses the election, but he says it was voter fraud. He rightfully won. And the Supreme Court, they rule one way or another, but now the Supreme Court, the legitimacy of the Supreme Court is really in question right now. There could be a vacancy still at the time of the ruling, and maybe it's split right down the middle, because usually there's an odd number of justices, but right now there's an even number of justices, so there could be a split decision. But what happens if Trump says the results of the election were fraudulent? I'm really the president, and he decides to move into his house right down the street. He's got a building right on, I think that's on Pennsylvania Avenue,
yep,
right? and
the old post office,
and he
ironically.
continues, right, and so let's just say he continues to call himself the president, and many of his supporters continue to call himself the president. Um, Many Republicans in government continue to call Donald Trump the president, and liberals, people on the left, call Joe Biden the president, and maybe other countries, Israel, who likes Trump, Israel considers Trump the president, and Russia considers Trump the president, but China considers Biden the president. I mean, what happens if we have two presidents of the United States?
Yeah, I think, man, there are so many catalysts in which uh, things just spiral completely out of control.
Mm-hmm.
And they have like the what the hypothetical that just mentioned here. I mean, it's a true possibility. I think this election will be incredibly close. I fear, and I mean, as I was talking about earlier, with those, there's like 250 lawsuits right now. And I'm sure that number will grow by the time election day hits us. And depending on how the courts rule in certain situations, I mean, obviously, one thing is for damn sure is that we're not trying to have an equal and fair election here. Let's be up in front of the honest, right? There are so many things right now that they're trying to suppress to make this as unfair and unequal as possible, both fucking sides, right? So you have the left with this whole mail-in voting thing, which obviously leaves the door wide open for tons of fraud. Whether or not that fraud is like historically a common thing, that can be debated. Supposedly it's not really so much a thing, but it definitely leaves in the possibility. And then also, I mean, on top of that, I mean, Trump doesn't do himself any favors when he says, vote by mail and vote by fucking person. It's I think, I mean, also you see the issues with the Green Party getting kicked off the ballot in Wisconsin. How the fuck is that a democratic process?
Mm-hmm.
It's there are many rigged things that are they're not doing themselves any favors. Nobody is, and I think this and instead of at the I this election will not be decided at the ballot box. Right? It'll be decided by other means.
Yeah.
What those other means will be make the difference. Whether it's going to be by chaos in the streets, whether it's through the courts, whether it's armed military action, whether it's secession, and all those votes from the West Coast are just thrown out because they're not part of the union anymore.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, think about it. It's like if the West Coast wanted to secede, like there would be so much incentive in the conservative ideology to allow that to happen. They'd be like, well, shit, like
Yeah.
like all these electoral votes that like always go blue, like they don't happen anymore. I'll be like, yeah, see you later, guys.
Yeah. Right. Right.
Shove off. So like, I mean, that would essentially give Republican rule, or at least conservative rule for the United States for the foreseeable future until the United States gets, uh, divided up into some kind of American Union situation, which honestly might be the best outcome in all this. It's something that I don't want to happen, and I think the likelihood of it happening are actually on the lower side. But what do you think? I'm not sure if there is a way to maintain the union, and if there is, if it's the appropriate thing.
I don't know. I mean, I just know the more neighbors that we have, the more possibility for war, basically. So I think one of the reasons why North America has really been so peaceful for the last for my whole life, basically, but really even before that. And I mean, peaceful is kind of like maybe not the appropriate word, because we did have the Indian Wars, basically took land from the Native Americans, and that involved conflict. We did have a war with Mexico, but in general, there hasn't been many wars fought on North American soil since we kicked out the Europeans, right? I mean, we fought the British here, obviously. The Spanish American War was basically about kicking the Spanish out of Cuba. There's if it's just the United States, Canada, and Mexico, then it's just three countries that have to get along in order to avoid conflict. But if there are 10 different countries occupying this area, like look at Europe, I mean, there's much more of a precedent there for conflict when you have many different competing groups in close proximity to each other. So I don't, for that reason alone, I don't think it would be a good thing for states to go their own way.
Yeah, I think the European Union showed some holes in the system. I mean, Brexit didn't happen for no reason, and
Right.
I think it would be, I would say perhaps foolish to put ourselves into such a situation. However, given the current trajectory that we are traveling down, I'm not sure if this train can be stopped.
Yeah, no, I don't know if it can. It's just whatever happens is going to happen, unfortunately, and we all just have to hold on, hold on tight. But on that note, I think we've well exceeded an hour, and did want to try to keep it somewhat, within that parameter. So I think we should wrap up. But I think this was a lot of fun, and looking forward to next week.
Yeah, this is great, man. Thanks for having me on, and let's try to do something again next week.
Yeah.
Hopefully, we can figure out this format out a little bit better to
Yeah.
do it more timely. But I thoroughly enjoyed this, man, and looking forward to more conversations.
And just as a reminder for everybody, Jeremy and I are going to be meeting once a week. This is the plan as of now, and we're just going to talk about the news. And we need to come up with another name, a better name for the podcast. I'm getting a little bit sick of the liberal conservative report. So if anyone has any suggestions, let us know. And maybe we'll just call it like Jeremy and Zach bullshitting. Something like that, like I don't know, something that's just so straightforward, but kind of, with a little bit of humor, that doesn't tie us down to only politics, because we can talk about other stuff too if we want. We can talk about whatever we want. So I don't know, maybe that's a conversation we'll have off air, but just want to put some ideas out there in people's heads so that maybe we get some good suggestions. All righty. Well, I guess we'll call it a night. Going to stop the recording here. Thanks everyone for tuning in.